Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. And before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that Varsity Search is currently working with a highly regarded personal injury firm in Houston to help grow their team. So if you are interested and have 4+ years of personal injury litigation experience, please reach out to me, Daniel at varsitysearch.com. All right, speaking of Houston, that is where we are today with our guest, Robert Tsai. Now, Robert is a senior associate with Walters Gilbreath, a family law and litigation firm with offices in Austin, Dallas, and Houston. Robert is a 2020 Texas Super Lawyer and a 2019 AVO Client's Choice Award winner. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Robert Tsai on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, Robert Tsai joins us now. Robert, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Sure, glad to be here. Thank you.
So before we kind of hop into the meat of our conversation, I do want to let you have an opportunity to just share with us a little bit about what's been going on at your firm over these last, 6 or 8 weeks as we've been dealing with this COVID crisis. We're talking here, it's May 28th for people listening now a little bit later, but tell us about what's been going on with your firm related to COVID-19.
Yeah, I think when COVID hit, it was kind of crazy just because a lot of law firms weren't really set up for remote capabilities. But my bosses and the partners at the firm, they were already set up. We use cloud-based technology already where we use Dropbox, we use Google Drive, we use Slack for inter-office communications. And so we've been designed to be able to work remotely from the very beginning. And some of the associates and lawyers in the firm already do that occasionally already. So it didn't really slow down us too much as compared to other firms that didn't have those capabilities, but it definitely affected us in a way that we're now, of course, adapting to Zoom hearings and adapting to even more remote options there and doing them longer term. Of course, client interactions in office are also going to be different now just to maintain the social distance. But for the most part, it was a change. But I would say our firm was well adapted for that.
Yeah, good. Well, and as the state has been opening up, so to speak, in the phases that we've been doing here in the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, has there been any kind of shift in your world or in around the courthouse or your clients, or have you pretty much kind of consistently stayed at the level we've been at from the kind of peak of this?
I would say it's gradually started shifting towards in the beginning, there were no hearings at all. Then it started gradually shifting this month to having Zoom hearings. And those are interesting, of course, on their own. But then no jury trials. I think there's just another recent Supreme Court order saying there can't be jury trials. So the in-person hearings, we haven't had any of those. I know that some of the courts were treating them differently, and maybe they were allowed by an emergency basis, but that's case by case, court by court, and each judge treated them differently, especially in the outer-line counties and in Harris County. So everything was basically pushed back. Courts and judges were pushing back trial dates, and especially hearings, and everything was just being reset for the most part.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've learned over these last few weeks in terms of how to most effectively operate within, whether it's a hearing through Zoom or a deposition through Zoom, or anything that you've gained from just a skill set that you want to share over the last few weeks?
Yeah, I think that because everything's kind of slowed down a little bit, we're a firm that's used to being in hearings and in court almost every single day. It's really just grinding almost nonstop. Now with everything slowed down a little bit, we've taken the time to meet with clients earlier on and even earlier than we can before And that really helps us prepare for the Zoom hearings, because with Zoom hearings, you really have to file everything in advance. You'll be able to see the opposing counsel's exhibits and exhibit lists. You'll be able to see basically strategically what their roadmap is, and likewise with ours as well. And so it gives us a chance to either file rebuttal exhibits, prepare in advance for that, and really have more time and stretch out our strategy longer and more effective, I think, in terms of the Zoom hearing. But that's something that I think we've adapted to and learned during this process.
Sure. What do you expect, or what do you hope maybe will stick with us after all this is over? Whether it's doing things by Zoom or remote, or working from more remote or home locations. Are you hoping to have any of this stick, or do we just go back to everything we were doing before?
That's a good question. I think that what we've seen that's helped is how some of the courts will now, and some of the judges will do things by submission, or even hear things remotely and by telephone conference or otherwise, but like your discovery motions and your motions for continuance, basically almost uncontested type motions, or hearings that really don't require a court appearance, because a lot of the time when you're traveling to and from court, that's billable time. And when before you had to show up in court, prepare for that, wait there in the courtroom until you're heard, especially in the family court world, there's so many cases at once. But now if you can do it by submission and do it remotely, in staggered times, or by whatever submission date the judge sets, that really makes the basic hearings and basic motions a lot more efficient. And I hope that sticks, because that saves a lot of money for the client's part. And you can focus on other bigger issues in the case instead of having many, many hearings. You can kind of shortcut those. I hope that sticks. I think some of the judges are starting to do that. Have those stick as well. So that really helps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously this has been a challenging and traumatic in many ways last couple of months, but I think it's always helpful and good to kind of look at, okay, what have we learned and what can we do better as a profession, as lawyers, as the bar, and everything else, and try to take something good away from it. And so I hope that that's the case. Well, awesome. Well, let's dive in a little bit to your practice. You've referenced it a little bit in just the way you've been talking about over these last couple of months. But tell us about your firm, Walters Gilbreath. Tell us about your practice and the clients that you represent, the type of work you do.
Sure. Walters Gilbreath is a family litigation firm, specifically focusing on family law. And we are based in Houston, Austin, and we have a new Dallas office as well. So we're almost statewide. We're trying to get and grow and get to bigger cities and get cases out there. For all the main offices, we all take cases all in the outlying counties. But we have about 10 or plus lawyers, 2 partners, and several associates in each of the offices. We are definitely a litigation firm. We're kind of known for trying the cases and going to hearings a lot. Just because if there's a position that we can argue for our client, we're going to take it to the judge. And if our clients don't want to agree, then we don't agree, and we have the judge decide. So we're definitely a heavily litigation and motion practice firm.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a little more about that. We've had that conversation before, and I've had it with a couple of other family law attorneys as well, that there is a fairly significant difference between, and not just like there's one or the other, but among family law firms, and the type of person that is going to be an effective family lawyer might be different, whether they're kind of approaching it as you've described it from more of a litigation standpoint, as opposed to maybe the kind of counselor role of the attorney and trying to work through from a social work type of dynamic with a hurting client. Not that you don't do that, but there's a difference in kind of the way that operates. Talk a little about that so people maybe not familiar with family law can kind of get a sense of what that looks like.
Yeah, I don't have actually any experience in collaborative law, which is I think what you're referring to, but that's the more counselor-based, therapist-based portion of family law. There's no doubt we have those types of cases as well. I think that in order for you to be a successful family law attorney, you almost have to have that type of mentality as almost an informal and expensive therapist not covered by insurance, basically, because we do have to listen to the client's problems and client's issues and be empathetic and really try and see how we can solve it. So I don't have any, I won't say I have any experience in the collaborative law, but I would definitely say part of my cases are less contested. The low conflict type cases, those are the cases that will emphasize whether what we can do to reach a solution. And it really depends on the client. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we definitely have the high conflict cases that either the client's positions are very far apart and there's not much we can do about it, or it's just because of the facts of the case and the facts of what we know, it just doesn't give rise to a reasonable solution that either party can really see. It's almost like one party has to have one position no matter what, and it's just completely opposite to the other. So I have a mix of both types of cases and some in between as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. Is there anything that's sort of happening within the family law litigation world that is maybe new or changing, or are there things happening within the law or at the legislative level, or just things that kind of what are the hot topics, I guess, at the family law conferences and CLEs right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. My firm lets me go to a lot of the CLEs, specifically such as like New Frontiers and the TAFL's conference. And there's always breaking edge new case law out there. One of the big ones that I'm dealing with in one of my cases right now is how you value either business entities or a partner or spouse's interest in a business, whether it's like an employment contract or otherwise. And those can be really complicated because at that point you're trying to figure out what the contract actually means. What interest does that spouse or partner have in it? And how much of it would be community property versus separate property? I think that another developing doctrine is what's called like the fraud on the community, or when there's a breach of fiduciary duty from the other spouse. That's definitely a gray area and is usually heavily litigated cases, and that's not really well settled law in Texas as well. And so when you have cases like that, that can be really complicated, and it really helps if an attorney well versed in that can make certain arguments and understand the position that they can. It really is an opportunity to almost make case law and make brand new law at that point.
Yeah, well, and I know we've talked about this on the show at least once before, and it seems like it always came up back when I was at the law school, and we did kind of day in the life of the family lawyer, or talked about family law as a career path, just about maybe it's just not understood or well known about the level of sophistication that can come about in some of these cases that you're talking about, where there's businesses involved, where there's land involved, obviously kids, but there's a lot more there than I think a lot of times people realize that can happen. And and it touches so many different practice areas kind of under the umbrella of the family law that there's so much going on, isn't there?
No, definitely. Like you can have, since if there's partners in an LLC and they're 50% owners, then at that certain point, you might even have to consider shareholder actions or suing each partner based on their defrauding the community or some claim that they've basically devalued the community property because they are joint owners in this business. And it gets really complicated at that point. There's no real black and white answer, and really is fact specific at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, share with us a little bit, maybe something that you learned as a young lawyer, as a new associate, maybe your first couple of years of practice, that you've found to be especially valuable and stuck with you through these years and has become part of how you practice today.
Yeah, definitely. Before I did family law, I was at a insurance civil litigation firm for about a year and a half. And during that time, I think as a young lawyer, what benefited me the most was, besides Baylor's practice court program, which really helped us with being able to take depositions and go into hearings and kind of being fearless in that respect. But being open to taking on as many projects as you can, just because I think as a young lawyer, you have to be a sponge almost and take whatever opportunity you can get from the partner, because once you get those opportunities, you can learn so much more. You put the hours in, and one of the biggest experiences when I was a young lawyer was being able to do a jury trial on my own, maybe a year or a little bit more than a year outside of law school in Harris County for a small 6-person jury and a small breach of contract type case. But just arguing that all the way through to verdict really kind of made me appreciate and learn to be fearless in the courtroom. You're going to make mistakes and you're
Of
going to do
course.
things not exactly perfect, but doing it and going through the steps and taking the hours of unbillable time to practice as much as you can from the beginning, that really helped. And just being able to say yes to opportunities from the partners gave me that opportunity. And that I think that's something that helped me as a young lawyer.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And there's really no substitute for actually doing something, right? I mean, just actually, I mean, you can study it, you can practice it, you can try to create an artificial environment to do it in, like we do it at the law school and all that. And that's as good as you can do, I think, at a law school environment. But then when you get out there and actually get a chance to do it, and like you're saying, at the firm you got to go to, and at just a year out or a year and a half out to be able to do that, what a great opportunity experience that you took advantage of. And I think insurance defense and family law are practice areas that do generally provide more of those opportunities at an earlier stage than maybe some others that can really be valuable down the road. And so I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Is there maybe something more recently that you've picked up on or learned that you wish someone might have told you when you were in your early days of practice?
What recently, I would probably say going to as much, if the firm offers it, going to as much CLEs as possible. I think it gives you the opportunity to network with other lawyers in your field and learning from them. I've been able to go against some top lawyers in the family law field here, and I see them at CLEs, and I'll talk to them and network with them and just kind of learn from them because, like you said, the practical experience I get from going up against a lawyer who's 15, 20 years older than me in a hearing, I'm going to be learning immediately what they're doing on how to either cross-examine, take an expert on direct examination, what type of objections work. I mean, knowing what the judge is going to rule and kind of foreseeing that. I think that going to the CLEs and kind of networking in that respect, in the sense that you're learning from other family law either colleagues or mentors in that respect. That's something that I've done recently, and I really appreciate now that I wish I had done even earlier on as a young lawyer.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, kind of the way that you talked about that, because I think sometimes people, lawyers, get a little bit, I don't know, maybe just tired of kind of going to and I guess we're not going anywhere these days anyway. But once they resume, going and listening to panels, listening to conversations, whatever. But it really is that networking component and that learning from the others that are in the room with you, not just necessarily the speaker or the panelist or the topic that's being presented, but it's all that other stuff that happens at those types of events that can be as much or more valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, and I want to add on that, just because when you start networking and learning with the colleagues and people in your field, you kind of start doing behind the lawyer scenes. I mean, there's going to be, when you're in the hearing and you're in courtroom and you're in front of your client, you're going to have to present your case the best way you can. But when you start having those informal settlement talks, discussions with the lawyer on the other side, and you happen to know that lawyer, and you can talk to them frankly, and just like, what are we really fighting about? What can we do to get to a solution that's best for my client, or best for the case, or what we think can happen? And like, what can I do, knowing the other lawyer and talking informally, and frankly with them, like what can we do? And that's something that you can only do if you either know the opposing counsel, and you've spent the time to know that lawyer. And that's something that, I mean, you can also do at either networking in the CLEs as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, as you've now kind of developed your practice and also had an opportunity to observe younger lawyers as they've been coming up as well, what's maybe what are one or two ways that young lawyers can impress their whether it's partner, their senior associate, the lawyer that's giving them work? What are one or two ways they can do that?
Yeah, I think a little bit about what I was going on before is that doing the practical experience and saying yes to opportunities that come up.
Yeah.
I think some of the associates that we've seen or I've worked with in the past that may not have worked out is because they were afraid to do the hearing or shied away from it, thinking that they were going to mess up. There's no doubt that it's not going to be perfect, but taking that first plunge and preparing for it and having that opportunity and doing it really gets you past the hump of, okay, it's actually not that bad. And it helps build that confidence to be able to do the next one and do the next bigger hearing and do ultimately trials and do it all on your own, right? And I think that young associates, if they take that first plunge, and the very first hearing, I remember my very first hearing, I was shaking. The very first deposition I took, my voice cracked on the record. So I mean, that's that. You can't take that back, but you have to do it. And once you do it, you can move past it and move past whether it's embarrassing or otherwise. It helps you cut your teeth and move forward.
Yeah. And I don't think I'll have to go back and listen. I don't think your voice is cracked in this podcast interview, so you're in good shape right now.
Years of experience.
Right. That's right. But no, it is interesting. And one of the probably comments that we would get the most from interviewers after talking to our law students, after going through OCI interviews or whatever it might have been, was that the candidates, the law students, didn't project confidence, and it's so funny because you couldn't, and it wouldn't have mattered if you went down the list and looked at, okay, how well is the person done in law school, or how smart they are, or how talented they are. It wouldn't have mattered. It was a total random sampling. Some people just had confidence, some people didn't. And it could be the top person in the class that didn't, and the bottom person in the class had all of it. And it's so interesting how it had nothing to do with their actual abilities or anything else. But it is an actual, independent trait or decision that you make to just take that step forward and leap forward. And so therefore, I say it as an encouragement to people listening that you can have that confidence right now today if you just decide to take that first step towards it. I mean, it's really, I think.
Right. It's like that phrase, fake it till you make it. That was definitely my mantra probably the first couple of years going out, because you're not going to know everything. There's no way you can know everything. You can read up all on the cases. You can read on as many articles as you want, but there's no way you'll know everything as a seasoned lawyer 10, 15 years out. But if you spend the time and you spend the nights learning about it, you can bet you can probably get close enough and then back it up later after you've already either not made a commitment, but faked it and then backed it up with research and kept it going. And then no one's going to know the difference at that point. I mean, you're basically being aggressive and representing what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. What about what's maybe a red flag? What's something that when an associate does this, you're looking at them and go, oh man, we have some work to do, or this isn't gonna work out. I know we've kind of talked about not being willing to step in and take those early hearings and depots. Is there something else that they do that causes you some concern?
Yeah, like what you said, but also, I mean, there's also the attention to detail. I think that associates, if you're not detailed and you're making typos or something and sending them to the partners, I mean, that's a big red flag. You just can't do that as a lawyer, I think. For more generally and more broadly, I think that if the associates are simply just task oriented, and only looking at, yes, the partner told me to do this. Yeah, the senior associate told me to do this. I finished it. And kind of just sit there and twiddle the thumbs a little bit. You got to think about the next step. You have to take the initiative, think, senior associate told me to do this discovery, these discovery responses, but what's the next step? Well, we should be preparing for either a hearing or preparing for something coming up, whether that's mediation or otherwise, and kind of looking back and taking a bird's eye view of how does that task fit in the entire case, and how does it get to where we need to go with what the client wants, and how do we best represent the client in that respect, and how that task fits into it. Having just a task-oriented, like a very specific, narrow view of it isn't necessarily a red flag, but if it keeps happening, that's going to be a red flag.
Yeah, and for everyone that listens to the show regularly, this hits on a very, very important and common, I feel like, theme. And I promise I don't give the answers to the guests ahead of time. I do give the questions, but not the answers. But the answer to this one seems to be kind of all swirling around this idea right here. And so for those of you that are, in that year 1, 2, 3 of practice, man, just go back and listen to what Robert just said, because I think that is, I couldn't say it better, so I'm not going to try it. That was perfect. And I really think that's the number one thing, I think, over these 6 months, 5 months we've been doing this, that's a way that you can stand out, that you can be on the right track, and also a way, if you don't do it, that you can, kind of set yourself back. So that's a really, really great one. I'm glad you hit it again.
Yeah, sure.
Well, as you've been involved in hiring lawyers over the years, or looking at as the way that your firm's gone about hiring over the years, what are one or two things that you're looking for, the firm's looking for, when it comes to on resumes and cover letters? Maybe a couple of positive things you're looking for, a couple of again, back to the kind of the red flags. What are some things that are getting resumes tossed?
Yeah, I think our firm has developed since the time I've been at Walters Gilbreath. I've been here now over 4 years now. What we're now looking at is when an associate has practical experience. I think that's the most important part. It touches on definitely what I've already talked about, but having an associate either moot court, even if it's a brand new grad, mock trial experience, even internships where they've helped prepare an attorney for hearings or otherwise, or mediation or something like that, or if they're a lateral hire actually doing the hearings and having trial experience. Those are all things we're looking for, because basically it means you've been tested in the courtroom, or you've been tested in a similar situation, and that means a lot to us as when we're hiring and looking at potential associates, because that means there's less hand-holding that we would have for the associates. Sure. At that point. We know that they can either know the way around the courtroom or are willing to take the initiative to learn their way around the courtroom. So I think practical experience is the biggest one, and I know that's hard to do, but there are ways to put your time in, but that's a big one for us, practical experience.
Yeah. And if you are that lateral, then highlighting that experience that you have on your resume, really, really critical, and making sure that that's seen, because as we know, most people aren't looking at resumes more than just a handful of seconds initially. And so making sure that experience, pops out immediately, would be important. And then as you walk through an interview process with someone, or get a chance to meet with someone before they're hired, what are a couple of things there that you're looking for?
I think if the interviewee has really done the research into the firm and really kind of know what we do as a firm and how they see themselves and they envision themselves in the goal or the vision of the firm itself, and what culture we have in that firm. They might not know the culture of the firm, but they generally will know what we do as practice, and may have either looked onto the website, looked into our bios about the attorneys, and seen what we've done, or maybe even seen us in the courtroom. I mean, that would be a really big plus, and just kind of looking at it, because we're in court almost every day.
Sure.
And so kind of just spending some time in the courtroom and just watching the hearings, you can definitely learn a lot. But the interviewees, if they're generally interested in working in the firm and have done their research, that's something that sticks out for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I just am picturing an interview scenario where the candidate is able to say, well, actually, I got a chance to watch you last week, Robert, and I was really impressed with how you did this, or I'm curious how you did that. As an interviewer, it seems like that would be I don't know if it'd blow you away or not, but it would be an unusual and a positive, I think, to hear a candidate say something like that.
That's happened to me before, and that was one of the lateral hires, and the family law world is so big, but that was one of the interviewees said, yeah, I've seen it in the courtroom before, and I think that what you do in hearings is what I'm trying to accomplish as well, and that really goes a long way, I think. That's
cool. Yeah, no, it's really good. So I'm curious too, especially in the family law space. How are you going about this? How would you advise young lawyers to start thinking about it in terms of starting to be a source for clients at your firm and be kind of in that business development, client development mode. What are some tips or some thoughts that you have on that?
Yeah, that is a tough question because hard for that's hard for associates, I think, to think about when you are so worried about practicing law in the very
Sure.
first few years. That's something that I've only started focusing on probably in the past couple of years because now I've gotten to the point where I need to consider how I can help the firm and by bringing business.
Yeah.
And I think in order what I wish I had done earlier and started earlier was creating a larger network and networking earlier on. And it's easy to say now, but it was so hard for me to do in the beginning because as a young lawyer, when you reach out to people and you have those lunches, the other person or the person you're asking to go to lunch, they generally know that you're probably doing it for networking purposes. But you at a certain point you have to start. And now I have lunches probably set up at least once a month with just people on my network just to touch base with them or referral sources or other referral sources and mutual friends. And that's just something that you have to do. And I've gotten cases from it. And then following up with your referral sources and letting them know and thanking them for it and just continually maintaining those relationships. It is definitely hard to do, no doubt. And especially, I'm not someone that's as like social or outgoing as other people might be for the networking. I don't really have the personality for that, but that's something that I've struggled with and have to do and force myself to do because that's the only way you're going to get better at it.
Sure. Do you find or expect that the majority of your clients that do come in will come by way of referrals from other attorneys as opposed to maybe friends and family or their relationships, their connections? Do you think or will there be a mix of both?
It's a little bit of mix of both.
Okay.
And going off on a little bit of what I said when you're maintaining relationships with older attorneys in your field, I've actually gotten referrals from older attorneys who the party or the potential client couldn't hire them because of the higher rate, and I have to have a lower billable rate, and they didn't have the caseload, or they might have a conflict or something else, and I can think of a few cases like that where I've been referred or had the potentially to be able to refer because I know that lawyer, I know the older lawyer. There's no doubt if you want to be the most effective to network outside of your field, and if you're going to be going to a family law luncheon, probably not best to try and say, I mean, y'all are all fighting for the same clients at that point. But so basically, opening a relationship with, for example, Houston Young Lawyers Association, I'm a part of here in Houston, and also the Asian American Young Lawyers Association here in town as well. There's not a lot of family lawyers there, and so you can make a big impact there.
Right.
But,
yeah, that makes sense. No, finding those that are in other practice areas that might have potential clients for you, but don't do the work themselves and would be a good partner. Yeah,
and keeping in touch with people I went to law school too. I mean, that was a big one as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very good suggestion. Well, we are now winding up our time. It's gone fast, and I really appreciate you being with us. We've got some rapid fire questions to close our time. If you're ready, we'll launch into those.
Sure.
All right. Name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Probably perseverance. I think that being able to get, whether it's a big mistake or small mistake, being able to bounce back from it. Everyone's going to make mistakes. I've made big mistakes, but as long as you've been able to own up to it and fix it and getting back out there and not letting it get you down too much. That's a big trait for a lawyer. I think just being able to take your licks and keep it going forward.
That's a great one. What habit has been key to your success?
Probably having a task list. I have a very long list of tasks every single day. Ever since I've been with the firm, I probably have like a month's work at any given point just because there's so much to do. But having that task list and completing it, crossing off things that I can do, having deadlines, immediately calendaring deadlines when they come in, otherwise you're going to forget, and immediately having follow-up times to do those deadlines and not having to deal with the deadline on the day of the deadline. That's the worst. So being able to have and spread out your task and you manage your workload that way. That's been the best habit I think that I've maintained.
I think that's good. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Definitely Slack. The partners are really big into the cloud-based, like the remote capabilities and the tech that we have. And so all I really need is my computer and an internet connection. I can work anywhere. So, but Slack is great because it's fast. You can share files on it. It's searchable. You can create channels for each case. So we have a channel for each case, basically.
Yeah.
We have a legal discussion channel, which really helps when we're reaching out to the other attorneys in the Austin office, for example, like Jim Piper. He's out counsel at our firm.
Oh, Jim, sure.
Yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge. And having the 10 plus attorneys at our firm being able to shoot back ideas and bounce ideas around in different channels really, really helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. We may have had one other, but I think you might be the first or maybe second to mention Slack. And I'm glad you did, because I do think it's one of those tools that the legal profession is going to play catch up on. But it sounds like you're ahead of the game on it, so that's cool. Your favorite social distancing activity? What have you been doing the last few weeks?
Lately we've been I've been having friends, and we've been doing board games by Zoom.
Yeah.
There's websites and like knockoff websites where you can basically play like code names, or like we've been in Pictionary as well. Pictionary is pretty fun. And then having that website, and as long as you're connected to the internet, you can play games and do trivia or otherwise with a good group of friends that you wouldn't be able to meet in person otherwise.
So you'll laugh at this. You found a way to do it through some tool online. We actually had a Codenames game with the board on the table with the camera pointing down at it, the whole thing. Now I'm going to go look for that because we love playing Codenames as a family. We've got multiple families with that get together to do that, so that's cool. All right, last one. Favorite legal movie?
Probably To Kill a Mockingbird. That is just a classic.
Nice.
I think that I watched when I was really young growing up, and then always kind of reread the book every few years now.
Yeah.
And it's just such a classic. I think that that just really sticks with you. I think what you really are as a profession and as a lawyer, it's kind of like that ideal that you're really working and striving towards.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent choice, and definitely on the top of our list to do in our legal movie deep dives that we do here. We've done the 5 or 6, but To Kill a Mockingbird is for sure on that list. We'll get done hopefully sooner rather than later. Awesome. Well, Robert, thank you again for taking the time. This has been fun. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with our audience.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been a great time.
All right. My thanks again to Robert Tsai for joining us on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing 2 things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then second, would you please rate and review the podcast in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show or I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget that if you or someone you know might be interested in an opportunity with a highly regarded personal injury firm in Houston and you have 4+ years of personal injury litigation experience, please reach out to me and let me know. Daniel@varsitysearch.com or on LinkedIn. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel here with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.